Hi, ni hao. Welcome to Chinese4Us channel. I'm Lily, the course writer, teacher, and co-founder at Chinese4Us. We're a Chinese online learning platform serving premium students from over 100 countries. This is a video about the 2021 new HSK or HSK 3.0. I want to talk about the new standards for each level in detail. If you're learning Chinese, you probably already know what HSK is. It's 汉语水平考试, Chinese proficiency test. It's an international standardized test for non-native Chinese speakers, and it tests their abilities in using the Chinese language in their daily, academic, and professional lives. According to China's Ministry of Education, so far there have been over 5.6 million HSK tests taken. So if you're learning Chinese and you want an official assessment of your language proficiency, the HSK is the test for you. So far, there have been 3 versions of the HSK. The most recent one, HSK 3.0, is most likely going to be the new HSK standards for at least another 10 years. HSK 3.0, many people might call it the new HSK, but the HSK 2.0 for these past 10 years was also called the new HSK in relation to the very first one. So if you Google the term new HSK, you might not get the right information. So in this video, we'll just call it HSK 3.0 or the 2021 HSK to be exact. And like we said, the HSK 2.0 has been used these past 10 years. Many students and teachers have suggested that the system might be a little bit dated and needs improvement. But luckily on March 31st, 2021, China's Ministry of Education finally released this. 国际中文教育中文水平等级标准 Chinese Proficiency Grading Standards for International Chinese Language Education. It's the new guidelines for the HSK 3.0 test question bank, and it's also the reference for educators to create new learning materials and lesson plans. It's 260 pages thick, and it's very detailed and thorough so we can understand the exact requirements for each level. And after careful research, comparing it with the old HSK requirements, and also after attending the International Academic Conference for the standards, I finally was able to share my thoughts with you guys. Hopefully, this will provide some useful information about the 2021 HSK 3.0. So I'll explain a few things. First, what the new 2021 HSK 3.0 requirements are for each level, how they are different from the old version, and the reasons behind the changes. And second, for you who's learning Chinese, how you can prepare yourself if you're interested in taking the test in the future, or if you're not taking the test but would still like to follow a scientific structured format in learning Chinese and finally achieve a certain level of language proficiency. And of course, how Chinese4Us plans to update our old courses and also our plan for future higher level courses. Because our leveled courses are designed to correspond with the HSK levels as well. Like our level 1 is supposed to be well over the old HSK 1, level 2 is well over the old HSK 2, and so on. And if you need a vocabulary list and grammar book for the 2021 new HSK 3.0, you can go ahead and click the button on the top right corner of this video and download them from the Chinese4Us website. So first, let's see what the 2021 new HSK 3.0 standards are and how it is different from the old HSK 2.0. First of all, the new HSK 3.0 has 9 levels now compared to HSK 2.0's 6 levels. The new 9 levels have been put into 3 sections: elementary, intermediate, and advanced. The added 3 levels are to meet the demand of students around advanced level and students that have already passed the old HSK 6, for them to know that if they want to continue learning and improving, what their goal should be like. And at the International Academic Conference for the new HSK 3.0 standards, when Professor Liu Yinglin from Beijing 语言大学 was explaining the new standards, He mentioned that HSK tests from level 1 to level 6 are going to have separate examination papers, and if a student passes, for example, 60%, they can get certified. But for level 7 to 9, there's going to be a unified examination paper. The level of the student is decided by the percentage of their score. And for HSK 3.0, we now have 3 dimensions of assessment standards: 言语交际能力 verbal communicative abilities, 话题任务内容 topics and tasks, and 量化标准 quantitative criteria. The verbal communicative abilities include 5 language skills: 听 listening, 说 speaking, 读 reading, and 写 writing for all levels, and also 译 translating for level 4 and higher. For topics and tasks, it specifies the topics or subjects that you're expected to understand and talk about in Chinese, and also the social tasks that you're expected to be able to do using Chinese. And of course, the quantitative criteria. This is the part that students and teachers want to know about the most, because this is about how many Pinyin syllables, Chinese characters, vocabulary, and grammar points are required in each level. For each of the 3 dimensions, we have pages of very detailed printed information for us to research to know exactly what we're supposed to do. We'll explain the requirements for each skill later in this video. For the old HSK 2.0, on the other hand, it only has 3 main requirements: 语言功能 language ability, 词汇 vocabulary, and 语法 grammar. First of all, the vocabulary and grammar for each level of HSK 2.0 is a lot less than HSK 3.0. And then, if we look at HSK 2.0's language ability, it is similar to HSK 3.0's verbal communicative abilities and topics and tasks combined. It tells us what students at this level should be able to do in relation to Chinese. However, it is extremely brief, only about half a page long, and it's only available for level 1, 2, and 3. Even for grammar too, it's only available for level 1, 2, and 3. This doesn't mean that after level 3 there's no more new language ability or grammar knowledge for us to learn anymore. Instead, there are a lot to learn, but it's just that there's no printed information for us to consult. So this chart shows us the major change that the new HSK 3.0 brings along. We'll talk about the vocabulary first. These numbers are the total amount of vocabulary required by the new HSK levels, and these numbers here are the added amount for each level. We can see that HSK 3.0 requires a lot more vocabulary than HSK 2.0, especially for lower levels. I know that a lot of us, both students and teachers, when we first saw this chart, we were like, what? Level 2 requires over 1,000 words now? Because you see, for the old version of HSK, if you knew 1,200 words, you would be considered HSK level 4. But now you're only level 2. I know it's frustrating for many students, but there's no need to panic, and here's why. Take a look back at HSK 3.0 level 6 and the old level 6 again. The old one requires 5,000 words and more, and the new level 6 has a total of 5,456 words and phrases. See, at level 6, there's not much of a difference. If you pass the old HSK level 6, then you're still pretty much level 6 by the new HSK standards, because at 5,000 word proficiency, a fluctuation about 400 words is not going to take a long time for you to catch up. So if this is 6,000 vocabulary, the old level 6, 5,000 vocabulary is about here. The new level 6 about here. But for lower levels, The old level 5 is only 2,500 words, half of level 6, and level 4 is 1,200, a little less than half of level 5, so about here. And level 3 is 600 words, half of level 4 again. Level 2 is really low here, 300 words, half of level 3. And level 1 only asks for 150 words. Looking at this, the leveling system of the old HSK seems to be very uneven. Like there are 6 levels, but how is level 5 only half of level 6? Like if you move up, accomplishing all the first 5 levels, but only to find out that you're just halfway there. This can be really frustrating too. But the new HSK 3.0 seems to make a lot more sense. Level 5 is over 4,000 words and phrases, about here. Level 4 is about here, over 3,000. Level 3 is here, level 2 is here, and level 1 is 500 here. You see the jumps between each level is a lot more even and balanced. You need about 800 words more from level 1 to 2, and then from 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on. Each jump is about another 1,000. This seems to be a more even process. And if we look at the old HSK, especially the lower levels from 1 to 2, you only need 150 more words. Like if we think about it, is 150 more words really going to improve our language skills by a lot? You can learn 10 more clothing items, 10 more food names, 10 more colors, 10 types of occupations, 10 school subjects. That's already 50 new words. But will you really feel that you have improved your Chinese a lot so that you can accomplish more social tasks when using Chinese? Probably not. And even from level 2 to 3, 300 more words really isn't that much. And because of this, a student basically can do a very short intensive training period that only targets the HSK requirements, be able to pass the lower levels, but still find themselves having a lot of trouble in real-life communication situations. And this is also why in China, for students who are learning Chinese in colleges and universities, they usually don't take the HSK test until they're ready for level 5, because, well, first taking the test requires a fee, and second, it's the complaints about how HSK level 3 or even level 4 doesn't really get you anywhere. Also, there's another thing that I noticed about the HSK 3.0 vocabulary. It's that the new vocabulary lists for the elementary and intermediate levels, level 1 through 6, includes many words and phrases that are practical for daily communications and social tasks. This was also mentioned at the International Academic Conference for the new HSK 3.0 standards by Professor Liu Yinglin from Beijing 语言大学. He said, 初等水平和中等水平略倾向于普通话口语，高等水平略倾向于普通话书面语。So now HSK 3.0 is designed so that level 1 through 6 have slightly more emphasis on spoken Chinese, and level 7 to 9 has slightly more emphasis on written Chinese. For example, these are words and phrases that the old HSK didn't include at all, but are actually very useful for daily life. In level 1, we have 电影院、放假、家人、男朋友。Level 2 has 住院、问路、西餐、停车场。Level 3 has 房租、搬家、世界杯、保安。And level 4, 酸奶、美金、倒车、老公、老婆。Level 5, 电子版、高跟鞋、二维码、喜剧、物业。Level 6, 房价、到期、果酱、盗版、一次性、取款机、微波炉。 After vocabulary, we'll now talk about the new 2021 HSK 3.0 grammar requirements. Each level of HSK 3.0 requires more grammar knowledge than HSK 2.0. In this chart, we'll be able to see how much more grammar HSK 3.0 has compared with the old HSK 2.0, which only has a little bit of printed grammar points for level 1 through level 3. And these grammar points are limited to 2 types, part of speech and some very basic sentence structures, and it only has specified grammar points for level 1 through 3. But HSK 3.0 introduces many more useful grammar knowledge, like morphemes, which tells us how a word is formed, so we can learn new vocabulary quicker, different types of phrases, fixed formats like 又怎么又怎么从什么什么起 sentence elements like subject, predicate, object, attribute, adverbial, and complement. Sentence types like simple sentences and complex sentences, method of emphasis, colloquial structures, and sentence group. If you need the detailed grammar book for HSK, please go to our website by clicking here. I know the list of grammar points may seem very long. And I know many students don't like grammar and prefer improving their conversational skills, but the grammar knowledge here is not a burden at all. It's only going to help us understand the language better. Because, first of all, grammar teaches us how to use vocabulary to put together sentences, and how to use sentences to put together paragraphs. So with more grammar knowledge, we'll be able to use more structures, sentence patterns, and express ourselves with longer paragraphs. And moreover, once we know the inner logic of how sentences and paragraphs are put together, we're going to absorb new information a lot quicker. In fact, knowledge like sentence elements have always been included in textbooks, college courses, and also in our Chinese-For-Us structured courses. It's just that before, the old HSK standards didn't write them down all in detail. And I remember even when I was writing our structured courses for Chinese-For-Us, in each level I added many words and grammatical structures that are not in HSK 2.0 because I personally felt that there was some critical information that the old HSK levels kind of missed out or didn't mention. This is why each level of our Chinese-For-Us structured courses is designed to be well over the relative HSK level. Because I always felt that if I wanted my students to have sufficient communication skills, my courses had to incorporate more than just what the old HSK requirements asked for. And I wouldn't doubt that many other teachers feel the same. But luckily, now we have the new standards. It's a lot more practical and it actually gives you a greater sense of accomplishment for each new level, instead of feeling like it doesn't really make a difference if you move up a level or not, which is also not motivating at all. And I also want to say that these new standards are not here to throw everybody off or to give everybody a hard time, because we gotta understand that when the HSK 2.0 was first introduced, it was 2010. Back then, there weren't many students learning Chinese, and for non-native speakers, there have always been this idea that Chinese is so hard, Chinese is the most difficult language, and the characters are so difficult to memorize. And you know, thoughts like these scare people off, and many people may want to learn Chinese, but we're just so intimidated. So the old HSK was kind of designed to encourage students, to let them know that learning Chinese is really not as hard as they thought. Like, if you learn 150 words, you're already level 1. And if you learn another 150, you're making meaningful progress to level 2. But the situation is a little bit different now, because like we've mentioned, after being used for so many years, now HSK has already been accepted as the official Chinese language proficiency test. And an HSK certificate is now accepted or even required for employment purposes or college enrollment purposes. So since HSK is now used more in professional fields, it is necessary to use a more scientific approach to arrange the HSK levels and requirements. And they really did a lot of work to update the HSK leveling system. While I was reading the new HSK 3.0 requirements, I can see that they really put a lot of thought into it, and I've also noticed many other updates and improvements that are worth mentioning. And I'm happy to share them with you in this video. So I want to discuss all three dimensions: verbal communicative abilities, topics and tasks, and the other two parts in quantitative criteria, Pinyin, syllables, and Chinese characters, what they expect students to be able to do exactly. And since it's our primary concern, first we'll look at the other aspects of the quantitative criteria. For Pinyin syllables, the old HSK doesn't have any written requirements, but it is naturally expected for students to be able to read and understand the Chinese Pinyin system. Because in the HSK test, Pinyin is used. The new HSK, on the other hand, has a list for each level. Like what syllables you're supposed to be able to spell, read, and also hear and understand at a certain level. The Pinyin syllables in each level are based on the pronunciation of the vocabulary in that level. This syllable list is designed for educators that want to treat the pronunciation of each character, which is a syllable, as a whole, and have the students recognize the syllable as a whole. We know that each character is one syllable. For example, 人 is 人. It is initial 日 and final 恩, and the second tone, three elements together. Some educators believe that instead of learning initials, finals, and tones first, we can treat the syllable as a whole and just remember the sound 人 as a whole instead of doing 日 人. However, for me, I feel that reading one syllable as a whole is okay for the first few classes into learning Chinese. But personally, I don't think a student should wait until level 6 to be able to know certain syllables, because once we learn the Pinyin alphabet and the 4 tones, we'll be able to precisely read and hear and understand all syllables. So I recommend all beginners learn Pinyin in tones, and knowing all syllables is an automatic result of learning Pinyin in tones. This is why on ChineseFor.Us, apart from our structured courses like Level 1, Level 2, we also have a separate Pinyin drill course and a separate tone drill course so that beginners can quickly pick up the Pinyin system to assist their learning in vocabulary and sentences. And the Chinese characters, of course, is another major change. In the old HSK system, students aren't forced to be able to write or even read Chinese characters until level 3, because the tests for HSK 1 and 2 both come with Pinyin, so if they want to, they can simply ignore all Chinese characters and just use Pinyin to do all the questions. But that's not the story anymore. For each level of the new HSK, there's a list of Chinese characters that students are expected to be able to read, and also there are lists of Chinese characters that students are expected to be able to handwrite for beginner, intermediate, and advanced level. So now, even beginners are supposed to be able to handwrite Chinese characters. The characters for each level are used to make the vocabulary for each level, because characters are like roots, prefixes, and suffixes in English. For example, if we know 学校 and 衣服, and then you see this word, 校服, it's not difficult for us to figure out that 校服 means school uniform. For characters to be able to read, the jump for every next level is exactly 300 until we reach advanced stage. And for characters to be able to handwrite, it's 300 for elementary students, 700 for intermediate students, and 1,200 for advanced students. So in order to handwrite characters, students are expected to know the basic knowledge of the Chinese writing system, like strokes and stroke order, and also punctuation. And furthermore, there are very specific requirements on the writing speed. For example, at level 1, at least 10 characters per minute. So from this, you can see that the new HSK 3.0 put a lot more emphasis on Chinese characters, which I totally support. I can never emphasize enough how students should start learning Chinese characters from day one, because Pinyin and Syllables are not the writing system of Chinese language. It's only the pronunciation guide. Learning Chinese without learning Chinese characters is like learning English without learning how to spell or read correctly. Only much worse than that. I wouldn't go too deep into this topic, but if you're interested, you can check out our hands-on writing Chinese character course. It explains what the Chinese writing system is like and why learning Chinese characters is important. It is actually the very first course of Chinese for Us. I started with the characters course because I have always seen students wanted to avoid or at least postpone learning the characters because of the long existing idea of Chinese characters being so hard, almost impossible to learn. I know it's hard, but I felt that it's the lack of proper explanation and training that's leaving students feeling so helpless. So I try to provide enough information so that students can find out for themselves how characters are like. Because once we know how things work, we're not going to be intimidated by them. That's also why for ChineseFor.Us structured courses, even for our Day 1 beginner course, every single lesson comes with a topic too, where for every character used in that lesson, we explain how it is constructed and how it is written in the correct stroke order. And trust me, if you learn characters, it might take a little extra time when you first begin, but you'll only find out later that it actually makes things a lot easier and quicker in later stages of your Chinese studies. And now we'll go back to the other two dimensions. The next one I'm going to talk about is topics and tasks. This tells us at each level what topics we're expected to be able to understand and talk about, and also what kind of social tasks that we're expected to accomplish. So we'll know exactly what we'll be able to do using Chinese. Of course, we're expected to do more and more stuff as the levels goes up. It goes from the very basics like personal information, daily routine, all the way to academic research, commercial trade, and international affairs. If you are familiar with our ChineseFor.Us structured courses, you'll notice that along with the quiz, we have a practice task assigned for each lesson where we describe a certain situation or a task, and the students are expected to either do a speech or write a dialogue or a story. So these topics and tasks put our language skills into practical use, and it is a test of how adequate our language is in different social occasions. And the last dimension we'll talk about is verbal communicative abilities. This is our language skills when we use Chinese language to communicate with people. And by communicating, it can be interpersonal communication. This is two-way communication, like we're talking to someone and also listening to their talking. Or we're chatting with someone through instant messages. It can also be presentational communication, where we present spoken or written information to a certain audience. This includes writing notes, articles, and doing public speech. And also it can be interpretive communication, where we're expected to comprehend or understand information in Chinese. So now for verbal communicative abilities, the new HSK 3.0 has specified detailed requirements on those following 5 language skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing, and also starting from level 4, translating. For example, for listening, level 1 students are expected to understand simple sentence dialogues, and as the levels goes up, they're expected to understand materials that are longer, more complex, and also with faster speed requirements. For speaking, as the levels goes up, students are expected to improve pronunciation and intonation, use more and more vocabulary, sentence structures. They should be able to express in longer sentences and even paragraphs, with more and more detail in descriptions and emotions, and also on more topics and various aspects of life. For reading, Level 1 students are expected to read language materials that are within 100 characters, and their reading speed needs to be at least 80 characters per minute, and each level has their own requirement as well. For writing, there are two aspects. One is writing Chinese characters, and the other is writing as a skill, for example, being able to write essays. For characters, Level 1 students are expected to be able to write the most basic 100 characters by hand, with correct stroke orders and punctuation. The speed for Level 1 is at least 10 characters per minute, and other levels have their requirements too. And for writing skills, as the levels goes up, students are expected to write longer sentences and paragraphs. The writings start from simple application forms, notes, to writings about daily life, mail, and public notices. For upper levels, the types of writing include narrative, expository, descriptive, and argumentative writing. And advanced level students are expected to use various figures of speech and Chinese idiomatic expressions, and also be able to write professional academic papers. For translating, students are expected to do translating and interpreting tasks starting from level 4. The tasks get more and more challenging as the levels goes up. So these are a short introduction of the 2021 new HSK 3.0 standards. All in all, my feeling about the new HSK 3.0 as an educator is that it is a good change and a positive update. And for us who are learning Chinese, if at some point we want an official assessment of our Chinese proficiency level, either for our own knowledge or for other purposes like getting a job or getting into a college, HSK is still one of the most authorized tests we can get. And if we're just learning Chinese as a hobby, then it's our own choice whether to take the test or not. As for learning materials, it's perfectly fine to stick with the materials or courses that we're using right now, as long as the materials or courses are structured and designed in a scientific way for the purpose of gradually improving your Chinese language proficiency. And later, when it's time, when we decide to take the new HSK 3.0 test, before taking the test, we can download the vocabulary list and grammar book for our level for review, so that we can target the vocabulary and grammar that we still have trouble with and get well prepared for the test. But also very importantly, apart from HSK requirements, it's always great to learn expressions and structures outside of HSK. Because HSK is just one standard, but life is limitless, and everyone's situation is different. For someone who works in the medical field, they might want to know how to say certain medical terms at a very early stage of learning Chinese, whereas most people don't. And if someone is really into computer stuff, it's very likely that vocabulary related to computers is going to be one of their biggest interests, because people always want to learn words of topics they want to talk about. And even in the actual HSK test, it is not uncommon that we see or hear a small amount of new words outside of the level or just outside of HSK standards in general. So always learn intensively and also broadly. And for our students at ChineseFor.Us specifically, if you're learning our structured courses at ChineseFor.Us, we want to share with you what we plan to do to go in accordance with the new HSK 3.0. It's going to be simple but effective. This is our structured courses compared with the old HSK 2.0 standards. And here's what we're going to do for the update. Our beginner course is going to stay the same. The old level 1 will be changed to level 1 part 1. Our old level 2 will be changed to level 1 part 2. And now after finishing the new level 1 part 2, you'll be well over HSK level 1 under the new 3.0 standards. And then our old level 3 will be level 2 part 1. And there will also be a level 2 part 2 as well. And after finishing our level 2 part 2, you'll be well over level 2 requirements of the new HSK 3.0. And we're also going to add about 10 lessons to the new level 1 part 2 to make sure that we cover all vocabulary and grammar points asked by the new standards. And of course, in the future, we'll continue to make higher levels. So if you're in the middle of learning, you don't really need to make any change on your end. If you've already finished our old level 2, once the new lessons are out, we recommend you revisit and complete those lessons as well. So all in all, just keep on learning. The test standards might change all the time, plus different countries even have their own testing standards as well. However, the actual language knowledge doesn't really change. Our path to progress is going to stay the same. Chinese language itself isn't going to get any more difficult or easier, and what defines a student as a beginner, an intermediate learner, or an advanced learner is not going to change. And all I want to say is that I wish everyone the best of luck learning Chinese. I truly wish that everyone can make greater progress in the future. And we at ChineseFor.Us are going to work harder and harder to provide you more lessons and courses to help you with your Chinese studies. So let's both keep it up. And if there's anything you're still concerned about, whether it be about our ChineseFor.Us courses or about the HSK test itself, just leave a comment. We'll do the best we can to provide more information.